Hey guys, tonight we're going back in time, way back to 17th century Japan, where the quiet rustle of silk and the snip of tailor's shears echo through the narrow wooden streets of Kyoto. You're not a samurai, not a noble, not even a rice merchant. You're something far more stressed, an aspiring tailor tasked with one of the most underappreciated, overlooked, and utterly intimidating jobs in all of feudal society: sewing a samurai's underwear. Yes, really. Picture this. You're standing in a cramped, sun-dappled room that smells faintly of starch, sandalwood, and panic. All around you, long bolts of cloth hang like solemn scrolls, and every surface is covered in spools of delicate silk thread. The head artisan scowls as you fumble to pick up your needle with trembling fingers. You're not making armor or a kimono. No, your job is even more unforgiving. You're sewing the one piece of clothing that, if it fails during battle, could embarrass a warrior so badly he never recovers. And, as you'll soon learn, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake later, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when people are listening. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of a tailoring workshop near the Kamo River in Kyoto. The city hums quietly in the background. Bamboo trees rustle, distant sandals click-clack on the wooden pavement, and incense coils burn lazily near a shop altar. The building you've just entered is long and narrow, lined with low workbenches, thread racks, and rolls of textiles so fine they shimmer like morning mist. Everyone's seated on tatami mats, backs straight, spines like arrows, hands moving like clockwork. You, however, are not. You're hunched over a small wooden stool, sweating profusely, your thread tangled for the 5th time in 10 minutes. The master tailor gives you a single glance. You swear it shortens your life by a year. Sewing in Edo-era Japan isn't just a craft. It's a spiritual practice, an extension of your character. If your stitches are uneven, maybe your soul is too. At least, that's how it feels when you're surrounded by artisans who can knot a perfect end loop with their eyes closed. And underwear, fundoshi to be exact, isn't some afterthought here. Samurai didn't throw on random undergarments before tying their hakama. The fundoshi was essential. It had to be snug enough to prevent wardrobe failures during battle, breathable enough to survive summer campaigns, and aesthetically appropriate in case someone saw it. Yes, even that was regulated. Everything was regulated. You try to focus. The material before you isn't soft cotton. It's coarse, stiff hemp. That's right. You're not even allowed to work with silk yet. Hemp is the training fabric, and it frays if you so much as sneeze near it. The edges curl. The tension slips. And worst of all, it whispers. That's right. Every time you pull the thread through, there's a tiny shaft, like it's mocking your every move. Outside, a bell chimes the hour. Late afternoon. You've been here since sunrise. Behind you, an older woman quietly hums while folding completed fundoshi into perfect rectangles, each tied with a crimson ribbon. She hasn't spoken once all day, and somehow she still manages to communicate deep maternal disappointment every time she walks past your workbench. You glance over at the wall scroll. It reads, "The cloth has a soul. Your stitch is its voice. No pressure." Now, imagine doing this while kneeling on tatami matting for 12 hours a day, using needles so fine they bend if you blink too hard. Your back aches. Your wrists are rebelling. Your thighs have fallen asleep. But the moment you straighten your spine or flex your legs, the assistant tailor nearby shoots you a look that clearly says, unworthy. This, by the way, is just the first step. You're not even an official apprentice yet. You're still in the observer phase, allowed to thread needles, cut fabric, and sweep the floor, but not permitted to stitch anything for actual wear. The fundoshi you're working on today, it's a practice piece, your 6th one this week, and it looks like it was sewn by a blindfolded raccoon. But Kyoto in this era doesn't do shortcuts. Everything, from making miso to painting screens, is deeply ritualized. Tailoring is no exception, especially tailoring for samurai. The samurai class were not only warriors, they were trendsetters, patrons of art, and, as it turns out, extremely picky about their undergarments. It's said that some lords sent back fundoshi that were a half-finger too short or too long. Tailors could be fined, shamed, or, if it was part of a formal uniform, blacklisted entirely. And let's not forget hygiene. Samurai might not bathe daily, but their clothing was expected to be pristine. Underwear was washed separately, dried in shaded breezes, and scented with camellia oil. That's right, camellia oil. You, dear listener, can't even fold a fitted sheet. Imagine folding something that can't wrinkle, must be tied in a specific knot, and absolutely cannot look like you rushed it. You take a breath, you try again. This time, the needle slips in with a tiny pop, and the thread follows smoothly. A single straight stitch. You allow yourself a small smile. Then the master tailor walks over, lifts your fabric to the light, and mutters, "Looks like a chicken's been here." Ooh. You nod, bow slightly, and try again. In the corner, a charcoal brazier crackles. Someone pours hot water into a shallow basin for tea, and the scent of roasted barley wafts through the room. It would be comforting, if not for the reality that your stitching still resembles a battlefield. Still, you press on, because failure isn't just embarrassing here, it's quietly devastating. Tailoring houses like this one operate under the watchful gaze of noble families, temple patrons, and guild overseers. Getting expelled means more than losing a job. It's exile from your community. But hey, maybe tomorrow will be better. Maybe your hands will stop shaking. Maybe you'll stitch in a straight line. Then again, maybe not. Historians still argue whether tailors in this era were more artisans or servants, whether they were truly respected or just tolerated because someone had to make the socks. What's certain, though, is that the pressure to be invisible was real. Your work couldn't stand out. Your name was rarely mentioned. If someone noticed the underwear, it probably meant you'd done something horribly wrong. But right now, your needle slides through one last time. You tie a knot. You exhale. You fold the cloth, just like the older woman showed you. 3 creases, ribbon on top. She glances at it, gives the faintest nod, and turns away. Progress. You're up before the sun again. Not because anyone wakes you, but because the floor is harder than you remembered. Your dreams were filled with unraveling thread, and the head artisan's voice now lives somewhere in your nervous system. Today is your first true challenge. You're no longer sweeping the floor or trimming excess fabric. You're going to apply, officially, to the artisan guild that holds a monopoly over tailoring samurai attire in Kyoto. It's not a club. It's not even an association. It's more like a bureaucratic maze guarded by ceremonial fire and grumpy uncles. You have to pass the entry task. It doesn't sound terrifying when they first explain it. Stitch a full-length fundoshi under observation. But then the twist: you'll be blindfolded, and not for fun. This is a test of touch, intuition, and humility. If your hands truly know the cloth, you shouldn't need your eyes. If they don't, well, your career will unravel faster than an overwashed sash. The morning is cool. Mist curls over the rooftops outside. Inside the workshop, the light from an oil lamp casts long shadows across the tatami mats. The master tailor brings you a tray with fabric, needle, thread, and a blindfold folded neatly like some cruel little napkin. You swallow your fear like a dumpling made of pins. Sliding the blindfold over your eyes, the world falls into muffled darkness. Sounds seem sharper. The scrape of wooden sandals, the click of lacquered boxes being opened, the quiet huffs of judgment. You begin. The hemp fabric is coarse beneath your fingers, like working with thin bark. You carefully fold the edge, trying to remember how many finger widths equaled a clean hem. 3? Or was it 2.5? You go with your gut. Threading the needle is impossible blind, of course, so you did it beforehand. Allowed, mercifully, under the rules. But now, as you push it into the first fold, your whole body stiffens. The thread resists, then pulls through. Good. That's 1. You sew, slowly, steadily. You whisper the stitch rhythm under your breath like a prayer. In, out, in, out. Tighten. Somewhere to your left, a more advanced apprentice smirks audibly. You ignore him. This continues for what feels like hours. Your shoulders ache. Your knees are buzzing. But your stitches are holding. Then the test supervisor coughs. Time. Blindfold off. You blink into the light. Everyone's watching. They pick up your fundoshi. It's not perfect, but it's not a disaster either. Most of your stitches are straight. Only one part loops like a noodle. And the knot at the waistband. It's tight, secure, and not a total eyesore. The head tailor gives a non-committal grunt. High praise in this place. You've passed the test. You're in. Sort of. You've entered the guild at the very lowest level. You're not even allowed to claim the title of tailor yet. You're officially a needle-bearer. It sounds noble. It's not. Your duties now include preparing thread, washing cloth with rice water, and massaging the hands of senior apprentices after long days. But hey, progress. What you don't get is freedom. Guild tailors in Edo period Japan are more tightly controlled than the loops in your stitch work. Everything is regulated. Who can sew what, when, and for whom. There's a caste of sorts within the artisan class. Tailors of undergarments are near the bottom, but they're still above street cobblers and sandal repairmen. And getting to sew for a samurai family. That requires connections, a proven track record, and at least 5 years of mind-numbing obedience. So, what does your apprenticeship actually look like? Each day begins with a purification ritual. Not elaborate, just a rinse of hands and face with cold water, a bow to the small altar near the window, and silent recitation of the craft oath. My hands speak not for me, but for those who wear my work. Then comes fabric preparation. You learn to soak hemp in lye and ash, then beat it flat with wooden mallets. This part sounds satisfying until your arms are jelly and your skin smells like a burnt sponge. Then you polish needles. Yes, polish them. Samurai underwear requires tiny, nearly invisible stitches, and even a slightly rough needle will drag the thread wrong. Each night, you rub them with fine ash and silk cloth until they gleam. Only then are you allowed to sew. And not just anywhere. You sit on the second mat from the south wall. the exact mat matters. Hierarchy, always. Each apprentice is watched closely. The guild keeps scrolls with stitching records. Every failed garment is logged. Every perfect one is praised. In writing, not in person, heaven forbid. Some say the guild master hasn't smiled since 1602. You also discover something odd. Tailors speak in code. There's a whole secret language of folds, knots, and seam lengths. A slightly larger hem on the waistband? That might mean mourning. A reversed fold. Celebration. Colors, too, matter. Though underwear was often plain, the stitching thread might carry subtle meaning. Red for vitality. Blue for endurance. Purple, of course, was forbidden unless you were a court noble. And it gets weirder. Some tailors gossip that fundoshi made for young lords often had a mischief stitch. A single knot sewn backward for luck, love, or flirtation. Others say that's nonsense, an old apprentice's tale. Historians still argue whether these symbolic stitches were truly widespread or just poetic rumors passed between generations of exhausted needle-bearers. But you believe it. You feel it every time your needle catches on something unexpected, like someone stitched a whisper into the cloth before you ever touched it. By month's end, your fingers are calloused. You can fold a fundoshi one-handed. You can thread a needle in candlelight. You no longer cry much when your work is picked apart by the senior apprentice who's been here since Tokugawa Ieyasu was a toddler. Still, it's not easy. One evening, as the others take a break, you stay behind to finish a piece for a minor samurai. You want it to be perfect. You hum to yourself as you stitch. The lamplight warms the fabric in your hands, and then, without meaning to, you sew a perfect line. No wobble, no gap, just clean, even thread along a fold so smooth it almost hums. You sit back, surprised. It's not magic, it's practice, but it feels magical. This moment of small triumph comes just before your next trial, of course, because just when you think you're starting to understand the craft, someone hands you a bolt of silk and says, "You'll be sewing for the Matsuda family now." And silk is a different beast entirely. You thought you were beginning to understand the fabric of this world, literally. Hemp, linen, cotton blends. You were getting the hang of them. You'd figured out their stubborn personalities. Hemp was scratchy but forgiving. Linen was crisp and eager to hold a crease. Cotton, a bit lazy but reliable. But silk is a snob. It glides away from your fingers like it resents being touched. It puckers at the first sign of a mistake, and when it tears, it doesn't fray. It sulks. If hemp is a bark cloth farmhand and cotton a gentle clerk, silk is a spoiled courtier with a powdered nose and too many opinions. And guess what? Now you're expected to make a fundoshi, an undergarment, for a member of the Matsuda family, a mid-tier samurai clan with a taste for elegance and a reputation for strictness. Specifically, for the younger brother of the clan head, Matsuda Renjiro, a 19-year-old aspiring swordsman with very sensitive skin. You're told this not in passing, but in a scroll, a silk scroll, detailing his aversion to rough textures, his preference for double-fold pleats, and a delicate warning. Renjiro-sama has been known to inspect the stitching himself. So, no pressure. They hand you the silk, dyed a soft, powdery indigo, the shade of a sky just before morning. And you stare at it. It stares back. It dares you to wrinkle it. There are rules for handling this sort of cloth. You must wear gloves dusted with starch. You must work on a spotless tatami mat layered with rice paper. You must keep your sleeves tied back with braided cords so no wandering kimono edge contaminates the sacred sheen. Your needle has to be resharpened. Yes, again, with a pumice stone no wider than a matchstick. And the thread? Not cotton this time, but gossamer silk floss spun by hand and knotted with a double twist, so thin it looks like moonlight on water. You spend your first 3 hours cutting the fabric, not sewing, just measuring, folding, cutting. The silk slides if you so much as breathe near it. And you? You have a bad habit of exhaling when nervous. The folds must be exact. Samurai fundoshi are not loincloths tossed together like laundry day improvisations. No, these are garments meant to sit invisibly beneath layers of hakama and armor. They must be snug but not suffocating, minimal but still dignified, and above all, absolutely silent. No rustle, no swish. The Matsuda family does not tolerate noise from underwear. Your hands tremble as you begin stitching. You work in total silence. Even the crickets outside seem to hush. You make your first pass. Just 6 stitches, maybe 7, then flip the seam and inspect it. Not bad. You keep going. The problem arises with the gusset panel. That's the section designed to allow movement, flexibility for a swordsman. You have to attach it using a concealed cross-stitch known as a kakushi nui. This is a kind of stitching that, if done right, is almost invisible. If done wrong, it looks like someone sewed it with their toes. You try 3 times. Each time, the silk pulls. It's mocking you. You can practically hear it giggling in a very expensive, imported accent. So you do what any reasonable apprentice would do. You take a deep breath, excuse yourself, and cry behind the compost bin. No one notices. Well, one person does. Senior apprentice Yuki, who has been trailing you with thinly veiled annoyance for weeks, corners you on your return. You stitched the hem backwards, she says, dryly. You freeze. No, I didn't. She smiles. You did, but it's fixable, barely. Here. To your utter shock, she kneels, takes the garment from your hands, and with astonishing grace begins to undo your error. Her fingers move like little katanas. Quick, precise, no wasted motion. She fixes the mistake in under 10 minutes, then hands the piece back to you. You're not bad, she says, standing. Just new. Everyone fights the silk their first time. Most lose. That moment sticks with you for years. Back at your mat, you continue, hyper-aware of every stitch. The fundoshi takes 3 full days. You redo the waistband twice. You burn your fingertip with melted wax, sealing a knot. You stab yourself with the needle more times than you'd like to admit. But at the end, it's done. You present the piece, folded like a miniature kimono, inside a lacquered box. An elder courier from the Matsuda household picks it up without a word and disappears into the city. The next day, a message arrives. The young lord wore it to archery practice. No complaints. That's the closest you'll ever get to a compliment from the Matsudas. Your hands are sore, your back feels 70 years old, and your needle is bent into a question mark. But you did it. You made a silk fundoshi for a real samurai. Still, the world doesn't stop turning. There's no feast in your honor. You return to your daily duties like nothing happened. And now that you've proven yourself, they expect more from you. You begin training in color stitching. That's where things get truly artistic, because samurai fundoshi weren't always plain white or beige. Some bore discrete patterns along the seams. A wave motif meant endurance. A mountain shape indicated loyalty. And in more playful households, you might find hexagonal family crests sewn with a touch of red silk inside, a mark of private pride. One apprentice claims they once made a fundoshi shaped like a koi fish for a daimyo's summer festival. Historians still argue whether such extravagant garments existed, or if they're just tailor myths passed down to amuse newcomers like you. You start learning the stitches. Asanoha, hemp leaf pattern. Sayagata, linked swastikas symbolizing continuity. Kiko, turtle shell hexagons. Each requires different folding angles, tension, and thread counts. You also study dye theory. The Guild believes that understanding indigo fermentation is part of being a real artisan. So, one humid afternoon, you find yourself waist-deep in a vat of fermented indigo leaves. The smell is unforgettable. A tangy swamp mixed with old socks and sadness. You stir the mixture with a bamboo paddle, watching it bubble like some sorcerer's cauldron. This is the process that gives samurai their iconic undergarment hues. You can't help but think, if only the warriors knew how unheroic their garments' origins truly were. After dyeing, you dry the cloth under sun-filtered rice paper. No direct exposure. Sunlight is cruel to color if unfiltered. You learn this the hard way when a whole bolt fades from deep violet to a sad, bruised pink. That day, your punishment is to scrub the floorboards with pickled radish brine. Yes, that's a thing. But slowly, steadily, you improve. You can now predict how silk will stretch before you cut it. You can hide a knot so deep in a seam, even Yuki squints to find it. Your fingers are sore, yes, but nimble, like tiny weasels trained in the art of undergarment espionage. One evening, Yuki passes by your mat. She pauses, picks up your latest piece, and turns it over in her hands. "This one," she murmurs, "has character." And that's the closest thing to praise you'll get all week. You've conquered silk, or at least survived it. Your fingers know its mood now, when to coax, when to command. And you think, just maybe, you're starting to feel like a proper apprentice. Until they hand you your next challenge. Linen with a conscience. That's the only way to describe this next commission. It's not for a Matsuda or any samurai household, but for a traveling warrior monk who insists his fundoshi be made from locally woven, undyed linen and stitched without harming any spirit-bearing creatures, including silkworms. He leaves behind a satchel of scratchy flax fabric and a set of handwritten guidelines, which feel less like a request and more like the 10 Commandments. Guideline number 1. No animal-based tools. Goodbye beeswax thread coating. Goodbye silk floss. Goodbye bone-handled scissors. Guideline number 2. Stitch only by daylight. No candles, no lamps. The fire spirit is not to be summoned for vanity. You sigh so deeply your lungs nearly quit. And yet, the commission is paid in advance. In coin. Real coin, not salted plums or pickled radishes. So you accept. At sunrise, you begin cutting the linen, which behaves less like fabric and more like dried kelp. It frays if you so much as glance at it the wrong way. The weave is uneven. One corner is stiff as parchment, another stretches like seaweed. This is not the refined linen of noble courtiers. It's rough, homespun stuff made by someone's cousin in a mountain hut with a questionable loom. You spend hours trying to match the weave before realizing it's supposed to be inconsistent. It's organic. Meanwhile, the absence of your usual tools is painful. You can't wax your thread, so it kinks like a snake having a tantrum. You can't use your polished bone awl, so piercing the linen feels like pushing a needle through thatched roofing. You try using a sharpened bamboo pick instead. It breaks. Twice. By mid-afternoon, your fingertips are covered in micro-cuts. You look like you've been hand-feeding paper dragons. But then the strangest thing happens. You start adapting. You time your stitches with the angle of the sun. You lay out the linen on a rice straw mat, marking folds using steam from boiled barley. You rig a frame using 2 chopsticks, your belt, and a string of dried mushrooms. Is it ridiculous? Absolutely. Is it working? Kind of. And there's something oddly satisfying about it. You begin to understand the monk's philosophy, crafting without disruption. Just you, the fabric, the air. No buzzing, no firelight flickering. It's like sewing inside a whisper. But then comes the real test. Seam placement. Unlike silk fundoshi for nobles, monk garments require minimal seams, a sign of humility and discipline. You have to fold the cloth in such a way that the single seam sits along the hip, not the front or back. It's an origami challenge with no second chances. One wrong cut and the whole design collapses. You spend nearly 3 hours folding and unfolding the cloth, muttering curses under your breath that you hope the monk's gods can't hear. Eventually, you get it. One long pleat down the side, joined with tiny stitches known as nuno mesashi, a crosshatch method used in sashiko embroidery. It strengthens the seam without adding bulk. You've only seen it in tea towels before. Now it's here, in a monk's underwear. You finish just as the last rays of sunlight vanish behind the paper screens. Your back is soaked. Your eyes throb. But the linen garment rests in your lap, soft, sturdy, and humbly perfect. You roll it into a scroll-like bundle, wrap it in mulberry paper, and send it off by hand to the temple's edge. You're paid with a pouch of silvered coins and a folded note. Your thread carries peace. Walk lightly. You're tempted to embroider that on your sleeve. Not every day is so zen, though. The following morning, you're slapped with a rush order. 4 fundoshi in 3 days, all for actors at a kabuki theater in Edo. The tailor who usually serves them has fallen ill from bad eel, and now the responsibility is dumped squarely in your lap. Kabuki actors, you learn, are not humble monks. They are divas. Each has their own demands. One wants a red silk interior for luck. Another requests extra padding near the waist to suggest heroism. A third insists his have a discreet embroidered fox on the hem in gold thread, visible only during dramatic leaps. You want to cry, or scream, or both. Instead, you set up 3 stations, one for cutting, one for stitching, and one for embellishment. You bribe 2 junior apprentices with sweet rice dumplings to help you iron and fold. Kabuki fundoshi, it turns out, are flashy. They're not hidden beneath armor. They're often seen during costume changes and dramatic stage poses. One actor even demonstrates the exact moment his character flips upside down during a thunder scene, and how the angle of the garment affects the audience's perception of his power. You didn't sign up to stage manage modesty. And yet, here you are, measuring gusset drape to match wind machine effects. You call on everything you've learned. Silk handling from Renjiro's garment. Fold logic from the monk's robe. Reinforcement stitching from rice bag repairs. You work through the nights, skipping meals, ignoring the cramp in your left shoulder. On the final day, you deliver the garments yourself to the theater. The actors barely look up. One grunts. One nods. One says, acceptable. Then, during rehearsal, you hear it. Applause. Not for you, of course, but your fox embroidery catches the spotlight during a leap and earns an audible gasp from the audience. You don't take a bow. But later that night, you sketch a little fox on your practice cloth. Just for you. In the quiet moments that follow, you reflect on how far you've come. A few months ago, you couldn't even thread a needle without nicking yourself. Now you've made garments for monks, warriors, and actors alike. Historians still argue whether kabuki actors ever commissioned personalized fundoshi, or whether these were just workshop rumors passed down through generations. But in your case, the fox jumped, the crowd cheered, and the coin purse was heavy. So maybe it's not about what's historically provable. Maybe it's about what's wearable, memorable, and, just occasionally, a little bit magical. You think you've seen it all now. Monks with linen philosophies, actors with acrobatic demands. But today throws something new your way. A widow's request. She arrives just after dawn, cloaked in navy blue, her silver hair coiled tight as a scroll. You can tell immediately that this isn't a woman who wanders. She arrives. There's purpose in her footsteps and precision in the way she sets down a small, lacquered box as if it carries not cloth but memory. She opens it with both hands, revealing what looks more like faded silk vapor than anything wearable. The edges are threadbare, the colors dulled into soft ghosts of what might have once been crimson and charcoal gray. "I'd like it mended," she says softly, her voice smooth but not timid. "For remembrance." You glance at it again. It's a fundoshi, technically, though at this point it could easily be mistaken for a tattered sash or ceremonial ribbon left out in the rain for a few seasons. You hesitate, unsure of where to even begin. Fixing underwear is one thing. Fixing this feels more like trying to glue together a breath. "May I ask who it belonged to?" you say, gently, not wanting to overstep. She smiles faintly, fingers brushing over the cloth. "My husband. He wore it during the Kyoho famine, when he bartered silk scraps for rice and stitched this himself. Said it was the most honest thing he ever wore." You pause. That famine, 1732 if your history holds, was brutal. Crops failed. People rioted. Families starved. For a man to make his own undergarments during that chaos, out of salvaged silk no less, and to keep it preserved for decades afterward, it tells you everything about him without another word. You run your fingers along the seams. Some are gone entirely, others still holding together through sheer will. A few stitches resemble something you once saw in a scroll about Ainu ceremonial garments. Triple tucked, oddly slanted. Desperation makes for unique solutions. You almost say no. Not because it's beneath you, but because it feels too above you. Like restoring it would be meddling with the past. Like you'd be stitching through someone else's memories with clumsy hands. But you accept. Because how could you not? This isn't tailoring now. It's textile archaeology. You don't wash it, of course not. That would strip away too much. The patina of time, the residue of worn hands and whispered prayers. Instead, you use steam from hot rice water, letting it rise gently, softening the creases like a lullaby sung to old fabric. Each thread you touch carries tension, like plucking the nerves of a ghost. The seams tell their own tale. Running stitch here, fast and utilitarian. Back stitch there, tighter, slower, deliberate. You find places where the original silk has been doubled up, fraying in places as though he tried to make it last through another season, or another winter. You decide to reinforce it with a backing of translucent silk gauze. Barely there, but strong. You baste it in by hand, one stitch at a time, whispering apologies to the original as you go. Every tiny decision feels heavy. You preserve every asymmetry. You do not correct the uneven fold, nor the slight warp in the weave. It's his story, after all, not yours. It takes the better part of 2 days. When you return it to her, she doesn't cry. She simply nods, tracing her fingers over the restored seams with a kind of gentle finality. "That's him," she says. You never charge her. And just like that, as if the universe sensed your emotional fatigue and thought, "Let's mess with them again," a new client shows up before sundown. A young samurai's attendant, tall and stiff-backed, appears at your door like a herald delivering absurdity. He needs underwear for battle. You blink. Isn't all fundoshi technically worn for battle? The attendant doesn't laugh. He wants it reinforced, more armor-adjacent, for riding, and sweating, and surviving. You nod slowly, already sketching out possibilities in your head. Something breathable but thick, something durable but not abrasive. A kind of boxer brief meets saddle cushion. Any preferences? Yes. Red, with his clan crest stitched near the tie. Of course. Function, flair, and family pride never separate in this world. You dive into the task, this time building more than just a garment. It's a tiny fortress, stitched with the kind of anticipation that only comes before a sword fight. You use densely woven cotton, folded and pressed so tightly it almost creaks. The gusset is reinforced with layered linen. You hand twist the ties into sturdy cords, thick as rope but soft to the skin. To reduce pressure points, especially for long rides, you embed strips of mulberry paper inside the waistband. A courier once told you this trick. It keeps the cloth structured but flexible, reducing chafing over long distances. He swore by it. You haven't forgotten. The crest, however, is the real challenge. You embroider it in indigo sashiko, hiding it just beneath the first fold, like a blessing only revealed when the garment is unwound. A samurai's charm, hidden in plain stitchwork. When he picks it up, the samurai grins. An actual grin, not the polite smirk of noblemen, but the wide, canines-showing grin of someone genuinely impressed. "I'll make sure the other side sees this," he says. You do not ask how. The week doesn't let up. By Thursday, your master hands you a scroll with a new assignment. Haikushi Fundoshi. Edo's bucket brigades want custom loincloths. Firefighters, you ask? He nods. They need fundoshi that hold up to burning beams, falling ceilings, and celebrity expectations. You raise a brow. Celebrity? Oh yes, he says. They want dragons, frogs, lightning bolts you're sewing for chaos again. Haikushi fundoshi are unlike anything you've ever made. The cloth is thick cotton, rougher than your usual fare. It's treated with starch and smoke-resisting solutions and then beaten with mallets until it softens just enough to be wearable. Some teams soak theirs in water before rushing into a burning home. Others use raw rice paste. And the designs? Let's just say restraint is not part of their vocabulary. One brigade favors flying dragon motifs, each fundoshi dyed with painstaking indigo-resist techniques. Another insists on thunder god emblems across the backside. For intimidation, they say. A third has a running joke, frogs stitched on the seat. So the flames know who they're dealing with. The dyes take forever to set. The stitching has to be done at night when the air is cooler. Your hands ache from pounding fabric. But there's something oddly fun about it. You're not just sewing underwear. You're making uniforms, banners, badges of chaotic honor. And yet, each commission still carries weight. Because you realize, as you fold the latest frog-festooned fundoshi into a neat square, that these are more than garments. They are declarations of loyalty, of memory, of absurd bravery. Historians still argue whether fundoshi tailoring was ever considered a noble craft, or if it was just a back-alley trade for unambitious apprentices. Some claim it was grunt work, necessary but forgettable. Others whisper that daimyo kept secret lists of the best tailors, those who could stitch not only cloth, but silence. You don't really care, because tonight you're threading another needle. You're binding another story into the fabric, a widow's memory, a samurai's courage, a firefighter's swagger. Tomorrow, who knows? Maybe a sumo wrestler with sensitive thighs. Maybe a poet who insists on lavender-dyed linen and embroidered haiku. But tonight, you place your last stitch, blow out the lamp, and listen to the silence settle over the workshop. Somewhere, a cat knocks over a bowl. Somewhere else, a frog embroidered on a firefighter's butt is making someone laugh. And you're exhausted, but deeply, softly, satisfied. By now, you've sewn enough fundoshi to fill a feudal armory's laundry basket. Some were stitched for honor. Some were stitched for remembrance. Some were stitched because apparently firemen in Edo had a collective bet about who could get the boldest animal stitched on their backsides. You suspect Tanuki juggling sake bottles is currently in the lead. But just when you think you've seen every possible reason a person might need historical underwear, your master gives you a new assignment that makes your eyebrows twitch. "Monks," he says, holding up a tidy scroll sealed with wax. "From Mount Koya." You look up from your stitching, hoping you misheard. As in, the ascetic kind? The ones who meditate for 14 hours and eat roots shaped like enlightenment? Exactly. They want traveling fundoshi, reinforced, washable in cold stream water, quiet fabric. You blink slowly. Quiet? Your master shrugs. Apparently, silk makes too much sound in prayer halls. And so begins your deep dive into the weirdly precise world of monk-approved undergarments. Let's start with the fabric. You'd think monks wouldn't be picky, but oh, they are. Linen? Too rough for meditative sitting. Hemp? Acceptable, but only if it's unbleached and not from the southern provinces. Cotton? Risky. It holds scent too long. Wool? Absolutely not. Too warm, and the friction with their robes creates what one monk called the squeak of worldly desire. So, you settle on rami, a bast fiber that's light, airy, and dries quickly. It also has the spiritual benefit of being untouched by indulgent dye, which earns you a rare approving grunt when you send your test sample up the mountain. Then comes the cut. Monks don't wear fundoshi the way warriors or peasants do. No elaborate knots or flashy lengths. Theirs is folded tighter, the strip shorter, the purpose purely practical. It's not a symbol, it's a tool, like a bowl or a broom or the act of breathing in silence. But getting the cut right is its own headache. You have to account for the constant sitting, the long walks between temples, the fasting, the lack of belts, and yes, the cold. One monk writes in his request that he once had a fundoshi freeze to him after crossing a stream in January. So you line the inside with a narrow band of brushed bamboo fiber, just wide enough to wick moisture and warm slightly against the skin. Not visible, not fancy, just functional. That detail alone, you later hear, earns your work a place of honor in their traveling packs. And yet, even after all the technical challenges, it's the monks' requests for spiritual symbolism that really push you. One wants a single stitch in red thread, just one, placed on the inside fold. To remind me of suffering, he writes. Another sends a poem with his measurements. Do not stitch me in straight lines. The body bends like breath, so should my cloth. You follow it literally. The fundoshi you make for him has a slight curve in the fold. It wears like a ribbon of humility, bending gently across the hips. Later, you learn he called it his walking prayer. Still, not all commissions come cloaked in Zen koans. Midway through your monk marathon, a different challenge rolls into the shop. A merchant's son, round-cheeked and full of pride. He slaps a bolt of lurid yellow silk on your table and declares, "Make me something so fashionable the kabuki dancers weep." "Fundoshi?" you ask. Number A statement. You try to suggest cotton. Too boring. You offer linen. Too poor. Eventually, you design something completely absurd. A 3-panel hybrid, part fundoshi, part western cravat, tied with 4 cords and a built-in scent pouch filled with clove. It's wearable, barely, but only in specific poses. You call it the peacock. He loves it. He pays in coin, plum wine, and a promise that he'll tell everyone who made it. He does. Within days, your shop sees an uptick in flamboyant requests. You're suddenly not a tailor. You're a trend. One particularly theatrical customer demands a fundoshi with stitched-in love poetry. Another wants his dyed with crushed berries because red feels more romantic than blue. It's a full-blown underwear renaissance. Of course, your master is delighted. Profits soar. You upgrade your needles. You buy better thread. You even sneak in a pillow for your knees. But the real turning point comes one afternoon when an elderly noblewoman enters. Unannounced, unaccompanied. She's small, hunched from years, but there's iron in her posture. She opens a hand-wrapped bundle and unfurls something that takes your breath away. A fundoshi, woven entirely from paper. Handmade mulberry sheets, twisted into yarn, then woven into fabric. It's crisp, fragile, and somehow still intact. "My brother wore this before his execution," she says softly. "He asked that it be preserved." You touch it with reverence. It's history. It's grief folded into fiber. She wants it replicated. Not restored, not improved, just copied. And so, over the next 5 days, you teach yourself to work with paper fiber. You research Edo-era papermaking techniques. You learn how to soften the strands without tearing them. You breathe so lightly during stitching, your assistant thinks you've developed asthma. The replica is not perfect. It couldn't be. But when you hand it to her, she closes her eyes and nods. "Now I can burn it," she says. "The memory, not the cloth." You realize then that you're not just making underwear anymore. You're making closure. Not every stitch holds fabric. Some hold silence. Some hold history. Some hold the weight of a person's entire life. Historians still argue whether Edo tailors had influence beyond fashion, whether their work shaped the intimate memory of the city or merely clothed its more vulnerable moments. You don't argue. You live the answer. You stitch it, one fold at a time. And now, as you settle back into your seat, hands stained faintly with mulberry paste and safflower dye, you finally exhale. You've stitched for monks, for nobles, for warriors and dancers and firemen and ghosts. And you're only halfway through. Your hands are beginning to forget what they felt like before all this. Smooth palms? Gone. The skin is now a road map of calluses. Every fingertip a raised, sensitive knot of memory. Every ridge tells a story. Where thread has burned through, where needles have bitten, where fabric has resisted. The pain has become background noise. You're not just a tailor anymore. You're a whisperer of seams, a cartographer of tension, a master of the hidden world beneath the outer kimono. Which is how you end up, one unassuming spring morning, being summoned to the finest bathhouse in the pleasure district. They don't knock. They never do. Instead, a folded letter arrives, tied with gold thread and sealed with red wax pressed into the shape of a peony. The scent hits you before the seal breaks. Something floral with a suspicious undertone of burnt wax and theater grease paint. Inside, an invitation, or rather a summons. They want undergarments for performers, specifically for the onagata, the kabuki actors who play female roles so convincingly you forget they're acting. These men don't just impersonate women. They embody femininity so precisely that real women often come to observe and study them. Their gestures are poetry. Their voices, smoke over silk. One flick of their sleeve and entire rooms fall silent. You've seen them on stage. Powdered faces like porcelain, painted lips like secrets. And underneath all of that elegance, someone has finally realized they need functional underwear. So, of course, they come to you. You sit across from a kabuki manager who doesn't blink once through the entire meeting. They need something secure, discreet, elegant, he says, tapping a paper fan against his knee. Also breathable. The stage lights are made of fire, you understand. You nod slowly, trying not to let your excitement show. This is your big break, or your unraveling. Back in your workshop, you pace. You frown at your spools. You squint at the sketch you started. This is not just tailoring. This is architecture, sculpture, alchemy. What you're being asked to create is a paradox, an invisible garment that supports movement, vanishes under silk, and feels like nothing. You experiment with every combination imaginable. Narrow bands of cotton that hug without squeezing. Structural gussets that won't crinkle during dance leaps, seams hidden so cleverly they seem to fold into thin air. The first few prototypes plop. Literally. They sag. They wrinkle. One of them audibly pops mid-test during a mock sword dance. That actor hasn't spoken to you since. You push forward anyway. Eventually, after dozens of failures, you land on something workable. A fundoshi variant with a wide front panel shaped to mold gently over the lower abdomen. Reinforced tie flaps at the hips, and an inner layer made of charcoal-infused bamboo cloth. Lightweight, odor-resistant, and pleasantly cool against the skin. The tail is stitched with flat, almost invisible seams. No edges, no interruptions. Just flow. When your first client tries it on, he does a spin, then a slow bow. "It feels like wearing a secret," he murmurs. You nod, trying to act like that wasn't the single greatest compliment of your entire life. And then the orders flood in. Not just from other actors. Oh no. Aristocrats, poets, a retired daimyo. Even a tea master who wants something liberating but spiritually aligned. Suddenly, stage-style fundoshi are the quiet sensation of the season. No one talks about it, of course. That would ruin the illusion. But it becomes a whispered fashion trend. Wearing the theater beneath your robes. Elegant subversion. You're no longer just a tailor. You're a curator of mystery. Then, just as you're starting to feel steady in this new world of silken secrets, a teenage apprentice arrives at your doorstep, panting from the run, holding a sack of barley and a folded note. "Please help," the note reads. "My master says my underwear is a disgrace." You blink. The boy looks sheepish. "It slips when I bend over," he says, "and chafes, and smells like pond water." You suppress a laugh, gently. Turns out, while you were busy innovating for the stage, the fields were still full of forgotten fundoshi. Farmers, apprentices, porters. Most of them wear the cheapest scraps, badly tied, sweat-stained, and ill-fitting. No one bothers improving farm underwear. No one but you. So you get to work again. For For the working class, you realize durability is everything. These are people who haul, bend, squat, carry, climb. Your fancy invisible seams would disintegrate in an afternoon. So you redesign the whole thing. Thicker weaves, triple reinforced crotch panels, ties that cross twice at the hip for a more secure knot. You invent something you call the ox fold, a diagonal pleat at the back that allows flex and strength with each step. And then you do something unusual. You treat the bottom edge with a thin wax layer made from boiled camellia oil. It repels water, doesn't stiffen too much if done right, keeps the fabric from absorbing mud. The test pair survives 3 washings and a full day in a rice paddy. The apprentice tries them on and bursts into tears. You hand him a towel. "Don't worry," you say. "That happens more than you'd think." Then, unexpectedly, you receive an invitation, not to work, but to attend a funeral. Confused, you go, wearing your finest kimono. It's quiet, somber. A monk sings a prayer as incense curls like ghostly thread. And then, just before the final rites, the family elder presses a folded white fundoshi into your hands. "He wore yours on pilgrimage," he says. "We want him to be buried in one." Your throat tightens. Now, you sew for the dead. Funeral fundoshi become your new specialty. White hemp, unknotted, just wrapped as softly as a goodbye. Sometimes you embroider a single kanji on the inside. Peace, return, emptiness. No one sees it, but that's not the point. Historians still debate whether Edo mortuary customs followed Buddhist transience or Confucian respect for ancestors. You've felt both in your stitching. You've seen the families bow over your work. You've tied the cloth with hands that understood it was the last thing anyone would ever wear. It changes you. Every piece after that carries more weight, not in fabric, in meaning. You hem with care. You tie with breath, you fold with silence. And then, one ordinary Tuesday, the door opens and a new kind of client steps in. A young woman holding the hand of another woman. They don't speak at first, then, shyly, "We're traveling north. We want matching ones." "Fundoshi?" They nod, but soft ones. "For sleeping, on the road." You smile. "Of course," and you make them. Light cotton, gentle ties, a faint hinoki scent. On the inside, where only the skin will feel it, you embroider moonflowers. Matching, delicate, hidden. When you hand them over, one of them says, "I never thought I'd get to feel elegant underneath." You think of the performers, the farmers, the dead, the lovers. You nod. Everyone deserves to feel elegant underneath. By now, you no longer measure your days by meals or seasons, but by thread counts, stitch types, and the strange, increasingly specific requests of customers. And today's request? A traveling monk who wants an undergarment fit for silence. You look up from your stitching. "Come again?" He repeats serenely. Silence. "I walk far, pray often, and sleep on stone. I need underwear that does not interrupt my thoughts." Right. At this point, you're not just a tailor, you're a spiritual interpreter, a weaver of mood. You don't just consider cloth weight or fiber grain anymore. You ponder vibe. So you sit down with a roll of undyed hemp, your softest linen swatches, and, after meditating on it a full half hour, you get to work. The design is modest, muted, a little longer than usual for extra coverage beneath robes. You use no dyes, no colored stitching. Everything is natural, unbleached, even the thread itself. You test it for noise, literally. You tie it, walk around in it, kneel, stand, stretch, and listen. Does it rustle, creak, whisper? It does not. When the monk returns and slips it on, he bows so deeply that you think he might dissolve into the tatami. "I feel," he murmurs, "like wind moving through pine." Your business is no longer just about stitching garments. It's a whole philosophy now. And, of course, word spreads. Not loud, flamboyant word, but whispers. Soft, knock-at-dusk sort of word. Pilgrims come. Poets. Widows. One person even brings you an old map, lays it out carefully, and says, "I want something that feels like this." You make a pair of fundoshi that mimic the curves of rivers, embroidered in faint blue silk thread that no one else will ever see. And they cry. This is the new normal. And yet, not all orders are poetic. One morning, a retainer from a minor daimyo appears, pacing like a sparrow on fire. "Urgent commission," he mutters. "My lord is going hawking tomorrow and insists on wearing something majestic." "Majestic," you repeat. "He wants cranes." You pause. "As in, on the fundoshi?" "No, no, like the spirit of a crane." Of course. So now you're designing underwear based on birds, and not just any birds. Myth-loaded, court symbol, poetry-referenced birds. Cranes in Japanese culture are associated with longevity, nobility, and grace. But also silence. They move in stillness. They mate for life. They're emotionally complicated as far as birds go. So you lean into that. You pick a pearl gray silk blend, light as breath. You double-line it with hand-spun cotton for durability. Hawk hunting involves a lot of standing, waiting, sudden dashes. Around the thigh edges, you embroider faint lines in the shape of feathers, visible only in certain light. You fold the knot just so, creating a silhouette that, from behind, faintly resembles outstretched wings. The daimyo is pleased. He sends a gift basket of dried persimmons and a haiku that reads, "Flightless, I ascend crane between layers of cloth. Even hawks blink twice." Your workshop has become a kind of unofficial guild hall for textile absurdity. But it's not all elegance and bird poetry. Some clients just want to survive. Like the swordsmith's apprentice who shows up with bandaged thighs. "My fundoshi keeps slicing me when I work the bellows," he grumbles. You flinch on his behalf. That's a lot of motion, a lot of heat. Time to rethink ventilation. You experiment with side slits. You try mesh insets. They sag. You settle on a reinforced diamond-shaped center panel cut from a blend of flax and stiffened ramie that deflects sweat and allows airflow. You stitch it with a method borrowed from rice bag construction. Crisscross tension binding. It holds. The apprentice returns days later with visible relief and the gift of a tiny metal crane, hand-forged. You add it to your growing shelf of odd mementos. Historians still argue whether Edo commoners had true fashion in the modern sense. Some say trends were restricted to outer garments, citing sumptuary laws that prohibited extravagance among lower classes. Others argue that covert self-expression thrived, particularly in accessories and, yes, underwear. You are living proof. It's a kind of underground textile rebellion. People wear drab kimono on the outside, then tie on citrus-dyed fundoshi beneath. They walk past magistrates with completely legal exteriors, while beneath, their undergarments carry secret slogans, family crests, even off-color jokes embroidered in private places. You've done them all. One elderly merchant requests something spicy. You deliver a pair with chili peppers stitched into the hip folds. His wife thanks you with a wink and an envelope of pickled daikon. Then come the seasonal fundoshi. You invent summer drift pairs, open weave cotton, airy as clouds, autumn versions, in rust-dyed hemp with knot closures shaped like maple leaves. New Year's specials, edged in celebratory red thread. People start gifting them. You even get requests for children's sizes, which after a bit of debating you agree to do, with comically oversized ties and a rabbit motif. There's even a brief period where samurai begin commissioning battle underwear. You never know, one shrugs. What if they find your body? Right. So you design something sturdy, indigo-dyed, reinforced at the hips, a pattern of waves, unbreakable, continuous, something a man could die in and not feel ashamed. It becomes popular. You're tailoring for the living, the dying, and the in-between. One night, your door creaks open. An old woman stands there, arms crossed, not speaking. She finally says, "I want the first pair I ever wore again." You blink. "Do you still have them?" "Burned," she replies, "in a house fire, 53 years ago." "Do you remember how they felt?" She closes her eyes. They scratched a little on the right hip, always, and the left tie was longer than the right. You recreate them from that memory. Every thread, every imbalance. She tries them on, smiles once, then leaves. You never see her again. But you remember the way she walked, like memory had finally softened into comfort. By now, you've invented 42 types of fundoshi. You keep track on the walls of your workshop. Tiny sketches, swatches pinned beside names. Silent Monk, Hawk Lord, Bellows Guard, Summer Ghost, Peony Drift. One night, you find yourself sitting on the floor, staring at a blank roll of cloth. There's nothing urgent left to do. No commissions, no rush orders. And you wonder, for the first time in years, what kind of fundoshi you would wear. Not as a tailor, but as yourself. You laugh. Because after all this, you've never actually made one. Not one. So you rise, take your softest scrap of fabric, and begin to stitch. The room is silent, save for the whisper-soft sound of the needle sliding through cloth, an oddly meditative rhythm that calms your breath, slows your thoughts. The scent of steamed rice from a neighbor's home drifts lazily through the paper window. Everything feels still, suspended in that golden glow of late afternoon. And for once, you're not stitching for a monk, a hawk-loving daimyo, or a fire-worn grandmother. You're stitching for yourself. And somehow, that's the most nerve-wracking commission of all. You stare at the soft cotton in your lap. It's been washed so many times the fibers barely resist the needle. You reach for your shears, fingers trembling, not from fatigue, but hesitation. You've made dozens of fundoshi for others, some practical, some extravagant, some barely wearable. But this one, it should represent you. It should say something about who you are. And you suddenly realize you don't even know anymore. Still, the work must begin. You cut a slightly asymmetrical rectangle, not on purpose, but because your hand slips. You leave it. It feels right somehow. You fold the corners inward. The creases don't align perfectly. Good. You line the edges with soft old cotton from an apron you used to wear, back when you thought the tailors were simply humble, invisible threads in the tapestry of society. And then, on one corner, you stitch a tiny crescent moon, barely visible, a whim. When it's finished, you try it on. It fits, not perfectly, but comfortably. It clings a bit too tightly at the hip, and the back droops ever so slightly. But it moves with you, like something you've worn in a dream, like something that's always been yours, but took years to find. You collapse onto your futon, arms splayed wide, and laugh, loud and free and absurd. And the moon, stitched in barely there thread, glows quietly on your hip bone as the evening air settles in. Peace never lasts. The next morning, a delivery boy arrives panting, hair plastered to his forehead, one sandal broken. He thrusts a scroll into your hand, bowing awkwardly. "Summons," he gasps. "From the Edo Textile Guild. Immediate attendance required." You freeze. The guild? That's like being summoned by the spirit of the shogun's accounting department. The guild that certifies kimono dye masters and regulates ink shades for scrolls. The one with judges, scrolls, and laws as stiff as rice glue. You break the seal and unroll the parchment. To the tailor of the Bellows Guard and Cherry Bloom designs, your recent entries into the regional Under Textile exhibition have garnered attention. You are hereby summoned to the Edo Textile Guild Hall for review and potential certification evaluation. Bring samples. Be prepared to defend structural deviations, thematic motifs, and stitching discipline. Someone entered your fundoshi designs into a regional fair. You didn't even know there was a regional fundoshi fair. You read it again. Your hands are shaking. You are being summoned to defend your underwear. Publicly. Before a council of bureaucrats. You begin to panic. The next 3 days are a blur of frantic preparation. You resew hems, starch the presentation pieces, and prepare explanations like a monk preparing koans. Why the asymmetrical knot? Because imperfection mirrors transience. Why embroidery on the inside? Because comfort begins in secret. Why eel skin? Okay, maybe skip the eel skin story for now. You arrive at the guild hall dressed in your best work robes, hair tied with a fabric cord made from scrap silk. The building itself is massive, 3 floors tall, with walls of pristine white plaster and black lacquered beams. A stone path leads to its grand entrance, flanked by 2 ornamental pine trees that seem to judge you silently. Inside, it smells of cedar and ink, and the faint must of ancient scrolls. A clerk ushers you into a large chamber where 3 men in gray robes sit behind a long, lacquered table, their expressions as warm as chilled tofu. One raises an eyebrow. You may begin your presentation. You nod, swallowing hard. You present the Bellows Guard first. You highlight its reinforced seams, pointing out the triple stitch overlap designed to prevent fraying even under armor. You show off its breathability. A judge nods, slightly. Then the silent monk. You explain its double-wrapped design, which muffles all sound, perfect for sneaking out of temple dormitories at midnight or simply moving through crowded tea houses with discretion. You display the battle wave, dyed with indigo and embroidered with crashing wave patterns that are only visible under direct sunlight. Inspired by Hokusai, you say, voice steadier now. A hidden energy. A judge leans forward. And the asymmetrical knot? You explain, it mimics the flow of a breaking wave. A reminder that imbalance often reflects movement, not failure. A long silence. Then the head judge speaks. And have you ever sewn one for yourself? You hesitate. Yes, recently. May we see it? You pause. From the folds of your satchel, you draw out your own piece. The soft cotton, the fraying edges, the tiny moon. You don't speak. You just lay it before them, palms open. The judges study it in silence. One adjusts his spectacles. Another picks up the piece and examines the stitching. The third, surprisingly, smiles. This is irregular, says the first judge. Unconventional. The second adds, yet undeniably expressive. The third says nothing. He simply pushes a box toward you. Inside is a seal, your seal. carved in reverse on a small block of wood, alongside a red ink pad. "You are officially recognized as a master tailor of undergarments," says the lead judge. "Article 9, Section 4. You may affix your seal." You blink. "That's it?" The judge nods. "If you wish, you may register a personal brand." You stare at the box. A strange emotion wells up inside you. Not joy, exactly. More like quiet astonishment. Like you've wandered into a dream someone else had for you. You press the seal into the ink, then onto the parchment. It leaves a bold crimson impression. You are official. Back at your shop, the world starts shifting in slow, quiet ways. Orders increase. Not dramatically, but thoughtfully. A retired geisha sends silk scraps with a note. Can you sew something that remembers laughter? A fisherman's wife requests underwear made from hemp her husband grew himself. He says it keeps the fish spirits calm. Even the kabuki actor writes back. Your silent monk is too quiet. I want tension, drama. Build me something theatrical beneath my robe. You do. You sew with odd materials. Plum bark, crane feathers, rice straw paper. You experiment with dyes made from tea leaves and saffron, and even burnt miso paste. Some designs fail spectacularly. One batch shrinks so much it's better suited for sparrows than people. But others, they whisper. People start treating their underwear like poetry. One man brings you his late wife's kimono and asks you to make something he can wear to feel close to her. Another insists his fundoshi be stitched while listening to only one folk song, repeated for hours. And every now and then, someone asks, "Do you still wear the moon one?" Yes, on special days. Historians still argue whether Edo-era tailors were artists or merely technicians. The guild ledgers mention few names. Fundoshi are rarely depicted in surviving art, but if those scholars could see the eelskin piece or the rain sound design with fluttered pleats, or the moon stitch you placed just under your hip bone, they might reconsider. Then again, the ledgers aren't where the real stories live. You sit outside your workshop one night, sake warming your chest, the moon high above. A cicada hums in the distance. The streets are quiet. You look down at your hands, scarred, calloused, impossibly skilled. You never became a lord or a samurai, but you stitched stories into silence, into cloth, into the parts of life no one sees, but everyone feels. The wind carries a sharp edge this morning, rattling the bamboo wind chimes above your door as you sip a bowl of barley tea. You can almost hear the cotton bolts shiver on their racks inside the workshop. It's the kind of morning that makes you want to huddle inside your robe and refuse to deal with any humans until at least midday. But humans, unfortunately, have other plans. There's a knock, sharp, rapid, businesslike. You open the door and blink. Two men stand there in heavy winter cloaks. One is tall and wiry, with the unmistakable gait of someone used to standing for hours without moving. The other is shorter, broader, wearing a sword, and not just any sword. His daisho has the understated ornamentation of someone who doesn't need to show off because his reputation speaks louder than any lacquered scabbard ever could. Samurai. You bow instinctively, deeper than you meant to. Good morning. The taller one speaks. We are here on behalf of Lord Hoshikage. He is in need of specialized tailoring. You swallow. Lord Hoshikage, the daimyo of Kiso. A name whispered with respect and, if gossip is to be believed, a little fear. He once had a retainer dismissed for chewing too loudly near a koi pond. His standards are not so much high as celestial. You step aside to let them in. Inside, they lower their hoods. Snowflakes melt on your floorboards. The scent of damp wool and pine resin fills the small space. We are told, the shorter one says, that you craft garments for the less visible layer of life. You nod. Undergarments. Fundoshi, specifically. He nods slowly. Our Lord is preparing for a high-level tea ceremony hosted by the shogun's court. There will be dancing, swordplay, long silences. He requires something that will not bind his spirit or his thighs. That's a very specific request. You ask carefully, would he prefer something ceremonial, reinforced, decorative? The taller samurai leans in. He seeks something invisible. Ah, not literal invisibility, of course, but the ultimate garment, one that feels like nothing, that vanishes the moment it's worn. Now that is a challenge. You sit them down and start sketching. You propose a seamless wrap with diagonal tension bands to distribute pressure more evenly. You suggest a blend of mulberry bark fiber and flax, lightweight, breathable, but firm. For binding, instead of knots, you offer interlocking folds that lie flush against the skin. But then you pause. How much dancing, you ask? The shorter samurai frowns. Enough to shame a courtier. Right. You rip up your draft and start again. This time, you incorporate a counterbalance fold beneath the waistline. You borrow a technique from kite makers, a reinforced interior gusset that shifts tension mid-movement. You recall an old fisherman's trick, twisting the fiber against itself during weaving for better spring. You test bamboo stitching needles dipped in rice oil to reduce friction. The samurai observe without blinking. They nod. We will return in 3 days. As they leave, you can't help but mutter, 3 days? For a ghost garment? The wind answers with a gust through the paper walls. You work for 72 straight hours, barely stopping to eat. The mulberry bark gives you splinters. The flax chafes your wrists. You burn through 7 test models. One disintegrates mid-bend. Another fits beautifully, until you realize it makes a loud snapping noise when the wearer sits. By the second night, you're hallucinating slight movement in the cloth. At one point, you swear the fundoshi prototype hums softly when placed near the brazier. You remind yourself that sleep deprivation is not a design tool, but by the third night, you hold it in your hands. It's nothing. Lighter than a rice paper letter, as flexible as a reed in spring. You turn it over, stunned. Even the crescent moon thread, you always stitch it somewhere, is hidden inside the seam. The samurai return on the dot. You hand it over. They don't speak. They bow and leave. For a week, you hear nothing. Then a letter arrives. No wax seal, just 3 characters in brush ink. Accepted. With it, a pouch of gold coins so heavy it dents your desk. You sit there a long time. Orders keep coming, and not just from nobles. A midwife requests a design that can be tied one-handed, something she can adjust between births. You construct it with asymmetrical loops and tabbed seams, color-coded with thread knots, so she can distinguish left from right in dim lantern light. A blind monk asks for a version he can identify by touch alone. You line one edge with pebbled indigo thread and add a tiny embroidered character near the fold. Nothing a sighted person would notice, but to fingers trained in reading temple sutras, perfectly legible. An apprentice thief. Well, he doesn't say it outright, but you know exactly what he needs. Quiet, durable, minimal drag. You deliver. He pays in silver coins and a single earring. The earring is fake. You let it slide. You even experiment with reversible underwear. One side cotton, one side silk. Mood wear, you call it. Your neighbors are baffled. A local poet writes a haiku. soft silk beneath me. Until I turn to the day, then cotton cradles. The haiku is bad, but the idea catches on. Soon, you're tailoring for groups you didn't even know existed. A group of traveling herbalists commissions a dozen garments designed to wick away the scent of mugwort and yarrow. You blend bamboo charcoal into the thread. It works a little too well. They vanish for 2 months into the forest and come back invisible to each other. You have to add embroidered initials just so they can tell whose is whose. A stage performer visits. She's loud, confident, a little too tall for the doorframe. She asks for something wild. "I want people to know I'm wearing it, even if they can't see it," she says, eyes sparkling. "I want to feel like a thunderstorm wrapped around my hips." You make it happen. You use metallic-dyed thread to line the inner waistband. You embroider lightning bolts along the inside hem. You stitch sound into silence. She sends you a fan letter 2 weeks later, raving that she wore it on stage and had the best performance of her life. You tack the letter to your wall. Historians still argue whether tailors in Edo-era Japan influenced fashion or simply followed it, whether common artisans ever truly shaped court style. But your client list says otherwise. Your doorframe has been scraped by swords, canes, walking sticks, and parasols from every corner of the realm. One scholar might find a court record of a cloth artisan of uncommon discretion, referenced by a daimyo. Another might come across an anonymous letter praising the invisible comfort worn beneath armor. No names, but you know. One night you find yourself staring at a new design. It's simple, almost too simple. Just a square of soft hemp, gently dyed with indigo. But it has a whisper to it, a kind of silent music in the weave. You don't sell this one. You fold it neatly, tuck it into a cedar box, and store it on the shelf behind the miso jars. Not everything needs to be worn. Some things are just for knowing they exist. You wake to the soft rustle of fabric against the breeze, a sound so gentle it almost convinces you the wind is asking permission to enter. Morning has broken over your tiny workshop, and you rise not with dread, but a strange sense of clarity. Clarity, however, is a dangerous thing for a tailor of undergarments in Edo, Japan. It means your mind is finally quiet enough to hear all the things you've been trying to ignore. Your supplies are running low, and more critically, your hands are starting to betray you. You flex your fingers. The knuckles click. The middle one on your right hand doesn't fully straighten anymore. A few too many late nights bent over thread and cloth, perhaps. Or maybe it was that accident a month ago with the rogue loom weight that fell and nearly crushed your thumb. Either way, your body has begun the slow rebellion common to all craftspeople who love their work too much to pace themselves. You soak your hands in warm water, then smear on a balm you learned to make from an elderly herb seller who swore by camellia oil and powdered rice husks. It helps, a little. But the truth is, you're starting to wonder if you can keep this up. Your reputation has grown. Not exponentially, not in any flashy way, but steadily, like moss on stone. It's in the way clients look at you now, not with suspicion or even curiosity, but with expectation. Reverence, even. People have stopped asking if you can make something and started assuming you already know how. You should be flattered. Instead, you're exhausted. Today's project is no different. A messenger arrived just after sunrise, clutching a scroll sealed in deep green wax and trembling slightly, like he'd been threatened with disembowelment if he lost it. He didn't need to tell you who it was from. The crest stamped in the wax, a soaring heron above crashing waves, belongs to a family whose roots go back to the Genpei War. They don't ask for tailors. They summon them. You unroll the scroll. It's a commission, but not just for any underwear. They want a set of ceremonial undergarments to be worn under full battle armor during a commemorative parade honoring an ancestor who died by ritual suicide. It's to be an event of solemn pride and national pageantry. No sweat stains, no riding up, no visible outlines beneath armor folds. The brief ends with, the wearer must feel the presence of his lineage from within. You rub your temples. Sewing someone's ancestral identity into a strip of linen is not exactly in the standard price range, but you're too tired to be outraged. Instead, you begin researching. This kind of job isn't about stitches. It's about symbols. You dig into old family records, consulting a friend of a friend who once did calligraphy for the clan's shrines. You learn that the ancestor in question, Lord Akanobu, was known for his unusual combination of fierce battlefield discipline and an obsession with poetry written in sand. It's said he once composed a death haiku while balancing upside down on a spear. Naturally, historians still argue whether this was symbolic, apocryphal, or just a particularly poetic form of concussion. Regardless, you've found your inspiration. You design a fundoshi patterned with wave motifs stitched in pale gray thread, meant to evoke both the clan's crest and the concept of impermanence. The fabric itself? Rami, not cotton. Stronger, more historical. It was commonly used for ceremonial garments centuries before cotton dominated the commoner's wardrobe. For the waistband, you incorporate an interior panel lined with tiny knots, each representing a stanza from the ancestors' preserved poetry. The knots aren't visible to the eye, but when the wearer breathes, they press gently against the skin, just enough to be felt, not enough to chafe. But you aren't done. On a whim, you embed a few grains of sand inside the hem of the front flap. Cleaned, dried, wrapped in silk before stitching. It's a secret only you will know about. But it feels right. A whisper of the beach where Lord Akanobu once wrote poems before disemboweling himself with the grace of a snow crane. That's the kind of detail no other tailor would bother with. That's the kind of detail that makes you, you. When the representative arrives to collect the garment, he stares at it longer than you expect. Then he bows, deeply. No words are spoken. You don't need them. And yet, instead of pride, all you feel is that same creeping worry. What happens when your hands stop being able to do this? You sit in silence that night, listening to the wind and the whir of the loom in the back. You haven't used it in a while. Most of your work now is hand-stitched, bespoke, detail-heavy. But something about the steady rhythm of the shuttle is comforting. Maybe that's the next phase. Training someone. Passing it on. Except who? Your neighbors admire your work, but none of them have the eye. Your cousin's son once offered to help, but he asked if the fundoshi was worn like a scarf. You nearly threw a bobbin at him. Still, it lingers in your mind. You dig through your old supply chest and find a strip of faded cotton. Your first ever practice piece. Uneven edges, crooked fold. But there's something about it. An eagerness, a sincerity. You wrap it up gently and place it in your work box. Maybe someone will come along. Maybe not. But the seed has been planted. Later that week, a young girl knocks on your door. She can't be more than 12. She stands with her hands clasped behind her back, trying to look confident but blinking too much. "My father said you might teach me something," she says, voice cracking halfway through. You blink. You were expecting a request, not a volunteer. She holds out a coin pouch. It's tiny, pathetic. more of a symbolic gesture than actual payment. "I'll sweep," she says. "I'll clean. I'll oil the scissors." You don't say yes right away, but you don't say no either. She comes back the next day, and the next. At first, she doesn't touch fabric, just watches. Observes how you soak the linen to remove stiffness, how you steam the thread with tea kettle vapor to make it lie flatter, how you murmur nonsense to the fabric to see if it responds. "Does that really work?" she asks one day. "Only if it listens," you reply. She doesn't laugh. She nods solemnly. The first thing you teach her is the invisible fold. The second thing is how to recognize the grain of the weave by smell alone. By the end of the month, she can thread a needle in the dark. By the third month, she's correcting your knots, and you, miraculously, are okay with that. There's an unspoken understanding between the two of you. No long speeches, no declarations of mentorship, just the gentle passing of knowledge, like folding one edge of fabric over another until it disappears into something useful. You still worry about your hands, about age, about fading eyesight. But now, as she leans over the loom with her eyebrows scrunched in frustration and a smudge of chalk on her cheek, you begin to believe something else. That your story, this strange, underappreciated life of crafting what no one ever sees, might not end with you after all. And maybe, just maybe, the future will have its own invisible genius. Stitching secrets into seams. The seasons shift again before you quite realize it. One morning, you open your door, and the wind smells like earth and water, like rice paddies just waking up from their winter sleep. You breathe in deeply. Spring in Edo doesn't arrive with a trumpet blast. It sidles in softly, one plum blossom at a time, like a cat testing a new cushion. And with it comes the busiest season for tailors. Everyone wants something new, something lighter, something to impress the in-laws at Hanami picnics under sakura trees. The daimyos send out requests for special garments to mark the changing weather. Even the local fishmonger asks if you can make his underthings breathe more freely, as if you're crafting silk for a koi. You oblige. You always do. But there's a different rhythm to your workshop now. The girl, her name is Kyo, you've finally learned, has settled into your world like a carefully pressed pleat. She doesn't ask too many questions. She moves efficiently. She refills the thread box without being told. She folds fabric with the precision of a court musician tuning a koto. But more than anything, she watches. She watches how you evaluate each client before choosing a fabric. How you match not just color to complexion, but thread count to personality. You once explained it like this. There's linen for warriors, and linen for scholars. Some men chafe at cotton because it reminds them of humility. She took notes, literal notes. You didn't ask her to, but one day you found a rolled scroll tucked beneath her pillow with headings like types of stitching for various types of shame, and how to tell if a man lies about his waist size. She's learning faster than you expected, faster than you did. There's something thrilling about it, and, if you're honest, a little unnerving. Because while she still asks for your opinion, she's also started experimenting. A double-wrapped fundoshi for traveling couriers. A pleated variation for acrobats. Once, you caught her trying to use mulberry bark paper as an inner lining. You started to scold her. But then she said, "Paper remembers the body." And just like that, you were silent. The thing is, she's not wrong. Mulberry bark paper, known as washi, was sometimes used in Edo for paper clothing, especially by the poorest classes. It's lightweight, breathable, and strangely durable when oiled. Not the sort of thing you'd recommend for noblemen's undergarments, but still, there's beauty in the idea. You guide her, gently, correcting where needed, praising sparingly. She thrives under this balance, like a bonsai shaped by both wire and wind. One day, a samurai walks in. He's older, with streaks of white in his beard and a gaze like polished obsidian. He says nothing for a long time, just studies your shelves, your tools, your bolts of cloth stacked in quiet towers. Then he places a single hairpin on your work table. It's carved from ivory, shaped like a dragonfly. "I need a mourning garment," he says, voice low. "For my son." You nod. No condolences. He's not asking for sympathy, only silence and cloth. But what he doesn't say, the unspoken, is what guides you. You work slowly, purposefully. You choose black rami cloth, but with a faint sheen that catches candlelight like tears. The stitching is reversed, so no thread is visible from the outside. A design once used for burial shrouds, meant to honor the idea that grief should be carried inward. The waistband bears no pattern, except for a single hidden fold, barely there, stitched in the shape of a dragonfly wing. You never mention it aloud. When the samurai returns, he nods once, then leaves without a word. But Kyo saw it all. Afterward, she's quiet. She doesn't ask about the wing. She doesn't need to. Instead, she begins making her own patterns. She designs a training fundoshi for adolescent boys, with instructional markings inside the waistband. Little pictograms that show which end to tie first, where to fold. You laugh when you see them. One image looks suspiciously like a startled eel. "It's educational," she shrugs. "It's ridiculous," you reply. But you let her print the design anyway, and they sell. Oh, how they sell. Kyo's ideas breathe new life into your little shop. The couriers whisper about her clever folds. The midwives recommend her postpartum wraps to every new mother. A kabuki actor orders 6 different undergarments, each tailored to the mood of his characters. She even invents a side-pocketed fundoshi for coin thieves. You're not entirely sure that last one was a good idea, but it does move product. She starts spending less time watching and more time doing. And you? You begin to let go. Just a little. You find yourself sitting more often, resting your hands between projects. You take walks, short ones. You watch the lanterns flicker in the dusk and listen to the distant laughter from the public bathhouse. Once, you even sleep in. Kyo covered the morning shift. Didn't wake you, just let you rest. It's disorienting and peaceful, like wearing a new kind of fundoshi. Tight at first, but gradually becoming something you can't imagine living without. One day, Kyo brings you a design for a traveling tailor's toolkit. Compact, foldable, includes thread storage, wax paper, and even a tiny padded cushion for emergency needlework on the road. "Why?" you ask. She shrugs. "In case I ever need to go." Your chest tightens. Not because you're surprised, but because it's true. She will go. One day, she'll outgrow this workshop, but she'll carry it with her, the way good fabric remembers every crease. And if she does go, maybe she'll teach someone else. Maybe she'll whisper to fabric the way you taught her to. Maybe someone in a town you'll never visit will wear one of her designs and never know where it came from. And somehow, that's enough. One evening, as the plum blossoms start to fall like soft punctuation from the trees, you sit beside Kyo on the porch. You're sipping barley tea. She's sketching another design. You say, "You know, I never meant to be a master tailor." She looks up. "But you are." "No," you smile. "I just never left." She considers that for a long moment. Then, without looking up, she says, "I might leave someday." "I know. And for once, you don't feel like the seams of your life are coming undone. You feel stitched into something bigger. A pattern that continues, even when your hands no longer guide it. You wake to the sound of rain tapping gently on the paper screens, like the world itself is whispering. A soft patter against thin walls, steady and unhurried. There's something oddly comforting in the way it repeats, like 1,000 tiny fingers drumming out the rhythm of another day in Edo. The air is thick with moisture and the faint, woody scent of wet tatami. Your joints feel stiff, but not unpleasantly so. More like they've softened overnight into the shape of this room. The kettle is already humming on the clay stove, steam rising in curly threads that catch the pale morning light. Kyo sits quietly by the hearth, repairing a torn sleeve with long, slow stitches. Her fingers move with practiced calm, elegant but economical, each movement like it's been passed down through generations. You've come a long way. You remember, not so long ago, when you couldn't even tell the front side of a kimono from the back. Now, you recognize subtle creases in hemp as tension points, can identify whether a stitch was pulled too tight just by the way the fabric bends. You still aren't great, but you're no longer hopeless. And in this city, that's almost a miracle. Today, though, feels different. There's a nervous energy in the room, even under the blanket of soft rain. It's not Kyo, it's you. Because yesterday, a letter arrived. Not a smudged note from a rice vendor or a customer with delusions of grandeur. Number this one came sealed in red wax, carried by a man whose sandals didn't even make a sound on the stone walk. The shogun's tailor has summoned you. The request is phrased formally. Assistance with ceremonial undergarment construction. But you know what it really means. They want you to help sew underwear for a high-ranking daimyo. Not just any daimyo, a noble marrying into a powerful Kyoto family. And the undergarments, they'll be part of the ceremony, on display, scrutinized, symbolic, no pressure. You consider declining, for half a second. But this is the kind of request that can't be refused without consequences. Refuse, and your name is Ash. Accept, and every stitch you make is a risk. So, you accept. You dress carefully that morning, smooth your robe, tidy your hair. You even let Kyo redo your top knot, though you mutter under your breath the whole time. She laughs. You look like someone who knows the difference between linen and silk. You raise an eyebrow. Let's not go that far. You'll do fine, she says, but then adds, too casually, just don't stab yourself with a needle in front of them. Helpful. The streets are slick with rain as you step outside. Market stalls are only just opening. A vendor selling roasted chestnuts waves lazily at you. A group of children dart past in mismatched sandals, splashing water everywhere. You step carefully, trying not to dirty your hem. By the time you reach the tailor's district, the sky has lightened into a soft, glowing gray. The estate looms ahead, all symmetry and silence. 2 guards bow without smiling. Their armor doesn't clink. You're escorted through gates into a courtyard where gravel has been combed into precise waves. Even the rocks here seem judgmental. Inside, the tailor's workshop is cathedral-like. Rolls of silk and hemp are stored on ceiling-high shelves. Wooden racks display spools of thread arranged by color gradient. Scissors hang from iron hooks like ceremonial blades. Everything smells of cedar and starch. The lead tailor enters. He's tall, gaunt, and doesn't say much. He looks at you like he's already calculated your weaknesses. He gestures to the center of the room where fabric samples are laid out on a low table. "This," he says, "is the commission." You lean forward. It's undergarments. A formal pair of fundoshi, the loincloth-style underwear worn beneath a samurai's ceremonial dress. But not just any fundoshi. This one is to be worn during a wedding ceremony, under layers of ornate silk, with potential for visible glimpses during traditional kneeling postures. It must be immaculate, symbolic, subtle yet profound. They want innovation, and they want your perspective. You study the fabrics offered: imported silk, gleaming and soft, dyed with safflower and indigo, and another blend laced with fine gold thread. Beautiful, yes, but they're missing something. "These are too loud," you say, before you can stop yourself. There's a pause in the room. The lead tailor blinks. You take a breath. "Forgive me. I meant, they speak too boldly. This is underwear. It should whisper." A long silence. Then the tailor nods once. You suggest hemp linen. Not coarse, but softened through hand-beating and repeated washing. A textile with history. Durable, breathable, and, most importantly, humble. "The daimyo is not humble," someone mutters. "No," you reply, "but marriage is." The tailor smirks faintly. You think you've passed some kind of test. You sketch a new design: 2 overlapping panels with internal ties. A hidden inner lining of shifu. Paper cloth spun with silk fiber. Lightweight, absorptive, and soft against the skin. You include an additional inner fold near the waistband. Not functional, but symbolic. A pleat, folded inward. At the center, 2 red stitches. "Fertility?" the tailor asks, glancing at them. "Continuity," you say. He doesn't argue. You're given 2 days. You work in near silence. You lose track of time, of meals, even of the rain outside. Your hands cramp. You stab yourself twice. Once you doze off while sewing, only to wake with a sore neck and a perfect crease where your face met the fabric. But you finish. It's good. No, it's right. When the tailor inspects your work, he says nothing for several minutes. Then he folds it, places it in a silk wrap, and sets it in a lacquered box. You may go. That's it. No praise, no dismissal. You're simply done. As you walk home in the dimming light, the rain has stopped. The streets are quiet. Even the frogs in the canal seem to croak more softly tonight. Back home, Kyo listens as you explain the commission in vague terms. She nods, slicing daikon into even rounds. "You added a red stitch, didn't you?" You pause mid-sentence. "How did you—" "Because that's what you'd want. Something quiet, but lasting." You say nothing, because she's right. That evening, she proposes a new project. A reversible fundoshi for traveling craftsmen who only carry 1 set. You suggest sewing in color-coded edge thread to indicate which side is clean. She rolls her eyes. You think men will remember that? So you propose scented thread instead. Persimmon for one side, sandalwood for the other. She grins, and just like that, you're a team again. Later, as you sip barley tea by the window, the world fades to quiet. You listen to the soft rustle of her stitching, the wind brushing against the paper walls, and you think, for the first time in weeks, that maybe you're not just surviving here. Maybe you're becoming something else entirely. The summer air thickens with the scent of pine smoke and damp earth as you wake the next morning. There's no ceremony today, no summons, no noblemen with hidden agendas wrapped in silk. Just a soft gray morning, the slow whistle of boiling water, and the rhythmic sweep of Kyo's broom outside. The weight of the city feels gentler now somehow, as though the world is no longer daring you to fail, but patiently watching to see what you'll do next. You pull on your robe, stretch your arms, and glance at the loom in the corner. It's quiet, untouched for days, but not forgotten. The itch to create, not just to follow patterns but to make your own, is back. You feel it deep in your fingers, in your breath. You're not just reacting to Edo anymore. You're starting to shape your place within it. Kyo returns with a bundle of cotton scraps tucked under one arm. "Another commission," she says, dropping it beside you. "Simple patch jobs, but one's from the bathhouse again." Ah, yes, the bathhouse. Your previous repairs, while modest, had somehow sparked a kind of underground appreciation. A few clients even requested that their fundoshi bear that same quiet detail you included for the daimyo. The little red stitch, the whispered continuity. You're still not sure how that rumor spread, but here it is again. A piece of your quiet rebellion being requested by people who bathe together but barely speak. You sort through the bundle. It's a mess. Frayed waistbands, uneven dye jobs, and one unfortunate case of moth damage. You sigh, then grin. This is what you've become. The secret whisperer of undergarments for men who never say thank you. It's kind of beautiful. You spend the afternoon mending. Every fabric has its own story. A soldier's linen stiff with rice starch, a merchant's silken underrobe stretched too tight across his belly. The work is repetitive, meditative. You stitch while watching the shadows shift across the floor, noting how the warm light brings out the gold thread Kyo hid in the corner seams. Her little joke. Samurai sparkle, she calls it. By dusk, you've mended all but one. A child's pair of under-kimono shorts, far too small to belong to any client you've dealt with. "Did you sneak this one in?" you ask, holding it up. Kyo shrugs. "It came with the rest. Maybe someone's apprentice." You nod slowly. The stitches are chaotic, uneven, like someone was learning. And then it hits you. This isn't from a client at all. This is from her. Or, rather, from someone she's been teaching behind your back. Kyo walks over, sits beside you, and watches as you study the messy seams. "I've been teaching the neighbor girl," she admits. "The one who sells charcoal. Her hands are good. She just needs guidance." You smile, turning the fabric over. "You've got a student." "So do you," she says. "She wanted to copy your red stitch." You laugh, almost choking on your tea. "Copy my mistake?" "Not a mistake," she corrects gently. "An idea. That's how we grow." And that's when it hits you. You're not here just to survive the strange customs of Edo. You're part of its fabric now, literally. Your stitches are out there in the world. They may be tucked away beneath layers of brocade and armor, but they exist. They matter. And now, it's time to make something for yourself. You go to the market the next morning, not for clients, but for yourself. You browse through bolts of fabric, running your hands across textures. Nettle cloth, camphor-dyed linen, a rare find. Banana fiber thread from the southern islands. Your fingers pause on a bundle of raw hemp. Coarse, untreated, but strong. Unforgiving at first, but softens over time. You know the feeling. Back home, you start from scratch. No template, no client, no purpose but expression. You cut, fold, stitch. Sometimes you undo entire sections and begin again. It takes hours, then days. You forget to count meals. Kyo watches silently, understanding something is happening. You're building a prototype. Not just underwear, but a philosophy stitched into seams. You try flat seams, French seams, double linings with reversible panels. You test the weight, the airflow, even how the cloth responds to body heat. One morning, Kyo walks in to find you wearing a half-finished pair over your robe, adjusting the drawstrings like a mad sculptor fussing over a statue's knees. "You've lost your mind," she says affectionately. "No," you reply. "I've found something. Your creation isn't beautiful, but it's functional, modest, and oddly elegant. It honors form and simplicity. Most importantly, it feels like yours." Word begins to spread again. This time, not from noble households or gossiping bathhouse owners, but from apprentices, street vendors, and lower-ranked samurai. People who heard about the foreigner, or odd local, who sews underwear like poetry. One day, a messenger arrives, not with silk or wax seals, but with a simple basket of sweet potatoes and a note. No signature, just one sentence. "Can I apprentice under you?" You show it to Kyo. She raises an eyebrow. "You're a sensei now." You shake your head. "Still struggling to thread my own needle." She smiles. "That's what makes you a good one." Over the next few weeks, you start teaching. Just 2 apprentices, both teenagers, both with rough fingers and wild tempers. But they listen. They learn. They laugh when you jab yourself with a pin and whisper samurai curse words. You show them the importance of a clean hem, a strong knot, and yes, the symbolic value of 1 red stitch. You find ways to explain the why, not just the how. Why fabric matters. Why undergarments, though invisible, carry dignity. Why effort poured into something no one sees is a form of quiet rebellion. Historians still argue whether Edo period craftsmen ever truly challenged the rigid social order of their time, or whether they simply found dignity within its constraints. But you're starting to believe it doesn't matter. Because even in a system designed to keep people in their place, there's still space to make something beautiful, something that lasts. You stand one evening at the edge of the Sumida River, your hands tucked in your sleeves, watching lanterns float by on the water's surface. The city hums around you, subtle, restrained, eternal. A man walks past, dressed simply. His robe flutters slightly, and for the briefest second, you glimpse a stitch of red near the waistband. You say nothing, just smile. You're not just sewing underwear anymore. You're stitching yourself into history. The days begin to blur, not in a haze of confusion, but in the steady rhythm of craft, community, and quiet pride. You rise with the sound of the temple bell, eat a simple rice gruel with pickled plum, and step into a small but growing workshop that smells of hemp, waxed thread, and roasted barley tea. And every morning, without fail, there are new garments on your bench, some ripped, some just unfinished, all asking the same quiet question. Can you make me whole again? You don't advertise. You don't even put your name on anything. But the workshop has a name now. You didn't choose it. Someone painted it on the paper screen one night in a careful brush stroke. The hidden thread. And, in a way, it's perfect. Because in Edo-era Japan, anonymity is often power. Subtlety is style. And a well-made pair of fundoshi with reinforced seams and discreet flair might not win you fame, but it earns a respect few dare to speak aloud. Your apprentices have taken to calling themselves thread samurai. They say it like a joke, but they show up every day and bow before the loom before beginning their stitches. You smile at their seriousness. They argue about techniques and challenge each other to stitch blindfolded, like martial arts masters training in the dark. Sometimes they get it right. More often, they prick themselves and curse in whispered apologies to the household spirits. You've learned to let them grow through chaos, just as Kyo let you flounder before finding your rhythm. Kyo, for her part, has taken over dyeing. What began as idle experiments in indigo vats has turned into an obsession with plant-based pigments. She now insists on naming every color: midnight persimmon, temple ash, samurai's regret. You don't argue. Her colors are stunning. And your work is something else now. You've expanded beyond fundoshi. There are padded winter underkimonos for elderly scribes, breathable night robes for candle makers, and an entire commission for a troupe of female no actors who wanted underlayers strong enough for backflips. One even asked for red silk lining. In case I die dramatically on stage, she explained. You said yes, of course. You always say yes to a little drama. But amid all the progress, the occasional friction remains. A city official arrives one day with a scroll and a stiff posture. Apparently, your apprentice's growing reputation has caught the attention of the local guild. They want registration, dues, an inspection, maybe even a bribe. You listen politely, nod, offer tea. When he finally unfolds the scroll, you lean closer and point out that one of the kanji in the regulation header is miswritten. He blinks, then coughs, then rolls the scroll up quickly and leaves without another word. You're not sure if that was a victory or just a delay. Either way, you sew on. By now, your own hands are marked with the small, invisible tattoos of a craftsman. Tiny calluses along your fingers, the slight crook in your back, the faint discoloration from dye and ash. You used to feel like an outsider in this city. Now you pass unnoticed through the markets, the alleys, even the noble districts. You belong, not because of who you are, but because of what you make. One night, a letter arrives. Not the folded parchment of a nobleman or the messy note of a street vendor, but something else entirely. A thick, lacquered envelope sealed with red wax in the shape of a chrysanthemum. You turn it over. There is no name. Kyo sees it and frowns. That's from the inner palace. You raise an eyebrow. I didn't know they wore fundoshi. They don't, she says, but they do wear underkimonos. You open it carefully. Inside is a single sheet written in elegant, clipped script. We have heard of your discretion. We request your services in absolute confidence. No patterns must be copied. No cloth reused. The garment is for her. That's all it says. You show the letter to no one. You work in silence for a week, creating a piece that's both modest and regal. Linen softened by sake wash. Stitches tight as calligraphy. Each fold designed to support not just a body, but a presence. You sew by lantern light, refusing to let the fabric touch the floor. When you finally finish, you fold it carefully into a silk wrap and hand it off to the courier with a bow. You never hear back. But months later, at a rare cherry blossom viewing hosted by a distant nobleman, you spot a court lady walking with the grace of a crane. Her outer layers shimmer in the wind, but when she turns slightly, you catch a glimpse of inner white linen, stitched with the faintest red thread, like a signature whispered into the weave. You say nothing, and that's your reward, because in this world, true influence doesn't shout. It hums quietly, like a needle through cloth. Historians still argue whether artisans in Edo had genuine agency or were simply cogs in a larger feudal machine. But you know this much. You've changed lives, beginning with your own, and not through revolution, not with banners or rebellion or grand gestures. You did it one stitch at a time, one red thread, one forgotten seam. And so, you sit beneath the paper lamp that night, watching your apprentices giggle over misthreaded needles and spilled dye. And you feel something you never expected to feel when you first arrived in Edo, with barely a clue how to tie a robe. Peace. Now, as the soft light of the paper lantern flickers and fades, let your breath begin to slow. The streets of Edo have quieted. No more hammering of sandals, no vendors calling out their wares, no dogs barking in distant alleyways. Just the hush of cloth folding upon itself, and the faint clatter of a loom slowing down for the night. Your hands, once unsure and fumbling, now rest gently in your lap, fingers curved inward, as if still holding the memory of thread. You've come so far through chaos and confusion, unfamiliar rituals and unspoken rules, only to find something more enduring than status or gold. Craft. Community. The warm pride of creating something no one else will see, but everyone will feel. Even now, someone walks the streets of this wooden city wearing your work. Supportive, invisible, soft, and that is enough. Let that thought hold you, like a well-fitted garment. Safe, worn in, yours. Outside your window, the cherry blossoms rustle gently in the breeze. Inside, the tatami floor cools under your feet. The kettle sighs one last time before settling, and the last candle burns low, casting long shadows on the wall like threads pulled across time. You are not lost anymore. You are woven in. Now rest. Sleep well, friend. Sweet dreams.